Okay, today we want to tackle on one of those big processes that happened in Pacific War, and that is air missions. There's several types of air missions, but we're going to start with the most common, and that is an air strike. And this is against either a naval target, like a task force, or very often in base hexes that contain air units, possibly could have some naval units there that are not activated, that aren't in a task force, such as Pearl Harbor, or possibly ground attacks against ground units. The first step that you're going to have to do in an airstrike is decide what units you're going to use for attacking. And the biggest thing to remember is that you can only attack a particular hex once during that air mission phase, whether it's disadvantage air mission or advantage air mission phase. You're only going to be able to attack it once. So if you want to use multiple units, you're going to have to decide where they're coming from, whether they can reach that, and then roll for coordination. And as I said, coordination only matters in terms of air to air. So if you're not sure you're going to always roll for coordination if you have multiple air units, regardless, but in many respects it might not matter, depending. In this case, we're going to demonstrate how you can have a mission from multiple hexes and multiple units. If you are using just one air unit, if I was to just launch this KAG-16 from the Yorktown and attack one of the bases, I don't have to roll for coordination. They're automatically coordinated, so you don't have to do that. But I'm planning to use multiple units. So as I choose these two, we're going to attack this base here. And I'm also going to use this is what I want to get into, a little bit of the air mission search details. I'm going to use this mission probably, in reality, it wouldn't necessarily be a wise thing to use this unit, because first of all, it's at level 0, so it's not going to have a good chance of coordinating with any other plane units. Also, the bottom right 2, which is the ground attack factors, that's not very strong. But we'll just pretend this is a great idea, and we're going to try to coordinate all 3 of those. All right, so we've got 2 units that are coming from this hex. We've got 1 coming from this hex, and that's perfectly okay, because eventually they're going to link up to do the combined air mission. So the first thing you do is roll for coordination, and if you checked over the rules, you have to look at the lowest rated plane unit and roll 3 times or less of that level. So since 0, 3 times 0 is 0, so you're going to have to roll a 0 on this particular air mission in order to coordinate it. So you only have a 10% chance of coordination. If this was not involved, then I would have to roll 3. 3 times 1 is 3, so 3 or less, there you have a 40% chance of coordinating. If this was an L2, then I'd have L2 would be the lowest level of plane that was attacking, so I would need a 6 or less, so you get 70% chance of coordinating, so it's pretty good. When you can use those L2s as the multiple units, that's a very good thing, but it doesn't happen that often because there's various levels, no matter what theater you're in and what particular year. as obviously as you go on through the years, the Allied side gets much better and more accomplished plane units, and the Japanese start to deteriorate because they can't replace their experienced pilots anymore. So we rolled for coordination. We'll just say they're not coordinated. Now the important thing is how they're going to move to the hex. And I purposely set this up so that the US had no choice but to move a certain way, just to demonstrate something. But as I'm moving to the hexes, or to the target hex, which is here, this one has a range only of 8. So it's going to have no choice but to move over this hex as it travels to the target, the mission target hex. So as it's traveling, there is a chance that this this hex here for the Japanese will detect that air unit as it travels over through the hex. So as it does that, I have to roll on the same hex chart. This is the Japanese side, and there's a difference. The Japanese are a little bit less likely to detect a unit that's an air unit that's in the same hex. That's the one advantage that the Allied side has. So if you roll, and in this case you got a 0. So now this is the key part of the detection rule for air missions. This unit was detected when it traveled through here, but since it's, even though it's not linked up yet, it's part of the same air mission. So in effect, these units are detected as well. And the main result of that is that if this one manages to get by this hex, which might be a little iffy because it's as level 0, and now the Japanese, since they detected this, they can actually do an interception here. We'll talk about that in another section of the video. So they've crossed over here, they were detected. Say they survive. If they only get 1 hit against them, they can keep going. And then now all 3 are, let's put them down here. All 3 are in the mission target hex, but guess what? They are already detected. So essentially, this target mission hex does not have to roll for detection because this one was detected as it crossed over this hex. Once that happens, the entire mission is considered detected. And it's just such an important rule to understand. Again, I'm not sure how often, if we pull back a little bit, how often this would happen. It hasn't happened to me yet in various games, but the fact that you're sending a unit from this base and crossing here, it's obvious as much as possible you'd like to avoid crossing enemy hexes when you're traveling to another target mission hex. You want to avoid that at all costs because that just increases the likelihood you're going to get detected. But it can happen, and that's why I wanted to show you how this works. I think there's a lot of questions on BGG on that. So once they get into that hex, they're detected, and this plane unit can alert. And then once that's alerted, we get into another phase of air missions, which we'll get into next. Okay, I'd like to continue by demonstrating the difference between in anti-air combat or air combat, depending on whether it's an interception hex or a CAP. situation. And just to follow through with the example that I showed initially, let's take a look at this first. And I moved these over so they could be seen a little bit more clearly with the white background, so there, I took them off the board. But if you remember the first hex that they were crossing over, this was coming from a base northeast, or actually west of this base, trying to get to this target hex along with these other mission units. So it crossed over, they alerted because they detected it. And so now we're going to have this against this as far as air combat. Because remember, this unit isn't headed to attacking this base or this plane, as a matter of fact. Basically, they've kind of interrupted and surprised them, the Japanese have. So they are going to get to fire on this mission unit, and they will not get to fire back. So let's just throw for an example, this one fires and the anti-air is 4 against this L0. And let's just say, I'm trying to, we want to get 2 hits on this, so I'm not going to roll, I'm going to pretend that I rolled the number that we need. And if you look here, it's air combat, it's CAP, which is versus an uncoordinated mission. It's not really CAP, it's a interception, but it acts like combat air patrol. So on a 4, I would need to roll a 1 in order to get 2 hits. It's uncoordinated. So let's pretend I rolled a 1 and I got 2 hits against this unit. Now this one is not going to make it to the mission hex. Once you get 2 hits at any time, your mission aborts. 2 hits on 1 unit. So this one has to fly back to base and does now have 2 hits. This one that came off this base that detected it crossing the hex just simply lands. And notice this base is a small base, so there's only 6 steps that can alert or launch at any time. So this one has 6 steps, there's no hits on it, so that was fine. Okay, so we finished that. We had an interception situation. Remember that the mission unit, as it was intercepted, cannot fire back. So there's no simultaneous combat. Okay, so that one's gone. Now we're left with these 2. And if you remember, the one mission unit was detected, so now these are detected, and the Japanese do not have to roll for detection, it's automatic. So they alert this fighter unit. And so now what happens? Well, now we have to do the combat procedure with combat air patrol and with the mission units. The US in this case has to designate one of these units. It has to be an F unit. They're the only ones that can be an escort. And we're just going to say we'll use this one that has 1 step gone already as the escort unit. Okay. So this unit and this unit are going to engage in fire. Now what happens? The Japanese unit can roll, and this is going to be CAP versus uncoordinated. Remember, we didn't coordinate this mission. This is where this becomes important, these 2 lines. There's a slight difference, you can see, you pull this up again, between it's pretty much the same through this column, but then as you go farther along you start to see the differences. So it's not huge, but it is there. So it's CAP versus uncoordinated mission. The Japanese have 5 air attack factors, anti-air. So they roll, and let's say they got 5, and again we're just gonna cheat, and we'll say they got a 3, so that's 1 hit. So now this unit has 2. Now notice that this unit, because I designated it as escort, would have to be totally eliminated before any hits would be applied to this unit here. So once they fired and they had a hit on this escort unit, 1 hit, that's it. If there were 2 hits, it would still be applied only to the escort unit. And then the escort unit fires, and it has 8, but it's simultaneous, so they actually only lost 1 step before they started firing. So it would have 7 attack strength, and let's say they rolled a 3, and that would be, as you can see here, oops, down, uncoordinated strike versus CAP, and only gets 1 hit. Now I should highlight too this as well. This is the biggest difference for having coordinated or uncoordinated. Now notice that when this combat air patrol, the alerted fighter unit, fired against the escort and it got 1 hit, this is the only unit that would be damaged. If this got multiple hits, it would still go on here unless it was eliminated. Let's say this came in and had 5 hits on it already, and then when this attacked it got 2 more, then 1 hit would eliminate this, and then the other hit would be applied to any other units that are in the hex of your choice, the Japanese choice in this case. Okay, then the escort unit fires against that, and I purposely replaced the L1 with an L2 here so you could see another little side detail that's important when you start getting multiple units like this in air combat. So this one is still actually at 5 steps because combat is simultaneous. So it was 8. This is an 8 anti-air. You subtract 1 for the 1 step that it originally had lost before combat started. So now we're at 7. And this is a little bit of important thing you should look on the charts for. Over on the side, this highlighted box, you notice that it says add 1 die, or add 1 to the anti-air strength of an air unit for every 3 steps of FL2 air units. Now that doesn't include the unit that's actually firing, but anything else in that mission that's in that hex, you can add 1 strength for every 3 steps of the FL2, 6 steps of FL1 units, and 12 of FL0. That's probably not going to be that common, but it could happen, especially later in the war for Japanese. So 3 steps, we actually have 2 added now. So remember we had 7 strength, and because I have 6 steps here, that's 2 3-step units of FL2. I can add 2 to the strength of this. So now we're at 9. Unfortunately, it's uncoordinated, and you can see, wow, what a difference there is. If I can pull back here, So you can see the difference between uncoordinated versus CAP and coordinated versus CAP. And again, that seems pretty logical. If it's uncoordinated, you're not going to be as nearly effective against any alerted units that are thrown up by the opposing side. So look at the difference. If I had coordinated this strike, and we're at 9 now. I mean, let's say I rolled a 3. Let's pull up. Let's say I'm at 9 and I rolled a 3. Well, that's going to be, if I'm uncoordinated, so I only got 1 hit. If I was coordinated, I would have had 3. So that's an incredible difference. But that demonstrates why it's important to be coordinated if you know you're going to go up against, or probably go up against, alerted fighter units. And don't forget that extra bonus you get for having more planes in addition to this one that's doing the escorting. And one final note, let's just switch this out. I'm going to throw that up. Let's pretend this was in the hex. And notice this is not a F-type single-engine plane. This is T, twin engine, or a B for that matter, or a long-range air. Any of those, if it's not an F, you can alert those units, but they can't participate in CAP. They're not really combat air patrol. They just manage to get up into the air, but they're still vulnerable to fire from the air. So in this case, this unit could not fire on the escort unit. The escort unit gets to fire, and that's it. So make sure you're looking and double checking to see what kind of units you're alerting when you get attacked at a base. Okay, so that's I think covers any anti-air interception escorts. I think that covers it, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, I wanted to set up some multiple possibilities so you can see what is possible and how you would follow through the process with the different issues at hand. So I added some other units just to show you the decisions you have to make as you do an air attack on a mission like this that we set up for the previous examples. So we still got the 2 here. I'm going to actually pretend that they weren't not alerted. Let's pretend the US player was a little smarter and did not use this unit because it's an L0, so they weren't coordinated originally. So now this particular hex is not alerted. They cannot put up planes, so we have planes on the ground on this base, along through an infantry regiment as well, and also a couple of ships to represent a task force that may have been in that hex. Okay, so these units are coming in. There was no alerting, so as soon as they get into the hex, they can start deciding where they're going to attack. There's not going to be flak, and there's not going to be any defense air that will be able to hit these planes, okay? So since we've got this possibility of maybe there's a task force in that hex as well as the base, the first decision the US player has to do is which one are they going to attack? Are they going to attack the task force, or are they going to attack everything else? And basically that's how they separate it out. There actually could be ships here at the base that aren't even in the task in a task force. They're just anchored there, again, much like Pearl Harbor. So in that case, in this case, they have to choose. They can either attack the task force that has these 2 destroyers, or they can attack here. That's it. They can't spread them out to have one plane unit attack here and one attack here. All right, so we got that established. Let's say they were really focused on getting this base interdicted, or maybe possibly getting these planes out of the way. I'm going to show, well, I guess we can use these 2 units. There's a big enough difference there with the anti-air and the ground attack that you can see the difference. But in this case, we're going to first say these 2 units are going to attack the base. They could have, since this is all part of the same force in the hex, as opposed to the task force, which is separate, you can actually send one. Maybe they want to cause a TQ check on this infantry unit because they're planning to invade later. You know, that's a possibility. So you would have to actually roll with 1 unit against the infantry ground unit, and then you could send this unit after the base. That's your choice. In this case, we're going to actually do a couple different things. We're going to have this unit attack the base, and just to show you how this works, this unit is going to strafe, and I'll show you why that might be a choice you'd want to make. All right. In order to attack this base, we just go to the 6, that's ground attack factors. We have to subtract 2 because they, well, let's go back. Let's make it 1 because we had to pretend they weren't attacked by alerted air units. So we'll go back to the 1 that it started with. So 6 minus 1 is 5. So we attack 5 against that base. Pull back. I'd love to be fancy and have a separate window pop up. Work on doing that. So now we're looking at air versus installation, and that's on this table. And if we decided it was 6 minus 1 is 5, so we'd be rolling on this column. Let's say we got a 2. We go down. 2 air versus installation, we have 3. So we get 3 hits on the base. It's not enough to interdict it. Remember, bases, you need 5 hits. Can interdict, but along with that 3 hits on the base, these unalerted air units have to lose 3 steps. And the trick with this is that the attacker, the US, chooses which one to lose the first step, and then the Japanese player would get to, I will choose the fighter, for whatever reason. Okay, and now there's 2 more steps. The Japanese could decide, okay, let's just put 2 run. I'm going to use my Pollard's counters here for that. We'll put those 2 in there. So the Japanese get to decide anything after that first hit. So remember, we attacked the base with this one. It still managed to get 3 steps off the air units. And now we're going to use this one to strafe the air. Again, it may not be a decision you'd want to make, but just to demonstrate how that works. Strafing is strictly against the air. It's not going to affect the base or the infantry unit at all. Now, the thing is with this, since it's strafing, it actually gets to use the higher anti-air value. So there's the first thing to realize, that instead of using 6, you're going to use 8 factors. And now we're looking at 8. If I rolled a 2 on the 8, and it would be strafe combat. Let's trade 8 to, I'd actually get 4 hits. That's quite a bit. Now, let's just see what would happen if I use the 6 instead for on a 2. That's still 4 hits. So I got the same number of hits, and I didn't, and that's why you'd have to make a decision about interdicting. But here's one of the issues you might come up against. You might want to strafe instead of attacking the base, because it's possible that you might be able to overrun the base with an amphibious assault. And if that happens, if you have an engineer unit, you can actually take it over, and it will be in one piece when you take over that base. So it's possible you don't want to have any damage to the base as you're attacking into that hex. Okay, and one last little note, attacking versus an infantry unit. Remember, that's a separate issue. You'll have to say, okay, I'm attacking this with that unit and attacking the base with this unit. First of all, the only thing most likely to happen is just doing a TQ troop quality check on that unit. I mean, you could see you'd have to have 7 and roll on a 0 in order to have an actual step loss with an air unit attacking that. As you can see here, I only have 6. I can't even get to that point. So it's most likely it's just for a troop quality check. And it's possible, again, if you're planning an amphibious assault, maybe you really want to have that in checking the troop quality, and it would have to roll a 6 or less. And if it doesn't, that troop quality is going to go down, or it would have to rally before that. So it's possible in amphibious assault you might want to get that to that point. I think that's it for air attack, with the mission target being a land base or a force hex like this. One last little thing that I forgot to do, because we didn't, when we came into the hex, we pretended that they weren't alerted. So this was not detected as they came in and did their air mission. So now the flak happens, and that tiny little number in the middle, 1 and 1, you add those together, there's nothing else there. So that's 2 flak factors, which is, you're going to have to roll a 2 or less. And then you'll get a hit on one of these. Now, one other note. So one last little thing concerning aborting a mission. Let's go back to the idea that there was an alert that happened with this particular base, this force, and they were able to throw up their combat air patrol, and they managed to get 2 hits against this air unit. If that happened, they have to abort, but they don't abort until after flak. So they have to stay there. They can't just leave and go back to their aircraft carrier. They need to stay and wait for the flak to fire, so they could actually get another hit, even though you're supposed to abort after 2 hits during the mission. So maybe they got 1 hit coming across and getting interdicted by another hex, and then they got another hit on the combat air patrol by the Japanese. They'd still have to stay there before they go back to their carrier. So oh, and almost forgot this one too. Remember back early on when we were talking about this particular fight in the mission hex, one of these was acting, I think it was this one, was acting as the escort. Something that I've seen on BGG, people questioning how that works once you do the attack on the base. If this survives the CAP and the flak, for that matter, this unit, even though it acted as an escort against the CAP, they can still attack once they've survived that. If they've gotten 1 hit or less, they can still go in. So even though they were escort, they could still attack the base. So just remember that too. It's kind of remember, this is not one plane. This is I should know how many planes this really represents. But you can obviously see that not all of this unit is necessarily going to be used to fight against the combat air patrol. So as it goes in, they're peeling off some, they do the escort, and then after that all happens, they can take the rest of the planes and go in and attack the base. It's a little bit abstract, but it to me it's logical. So don't forget that part of your air mission attack.